It was a quiet afternoon in Los Angeles and the sun was hiding behind a thick layer of smog when the script arrived at the small office where the actor was sitting alone. He had seen many papers like this before, stacks of them filled with dreams that never came true and stories that nobody wanted to hear. He was not the young superstar who used to fly through the air in slow motion anymore, and the phone did not ring as often as it used to ring in the 90s. He was older now, his face lined with a quiet sadness that the world had watched grow over the years, and the industry had a way of forgetting people once they stopped being the newest thing. He was comfortable with the silence in his life, but he still loved the work. He still loved the feeling of becoming someone else on a screen. He picked up the script and the title on the cover read John Wick. It was a strange name for a character, and the story inside was even stranger. It was about a retired killer who had lost his wife and then his dog. The dog was the last gift his wife left for him, and when some punk kid stole his car and killed that dog, something inside the man broke. He came out of retirement to burn the whole world down. It was violent and dark and filled with blood, but there was a deep sadness in the middle of all the shooting. It was not just an action movie where people fired guns without thinking. It was a story about grief and how hard it is to say goodbye to the people you love. The actor sat there reading the pages, and he did not stop for hours. He saw himself in the old tired man who just wanted to be left alone but could not find peace. He understood that pain in a way that most people in Hollywood did not understand it. He knew that making a movie like this would not be easy. The studios in town were looking for big superhero movies with explosions in every scene, or comedies that made people laugh without thinking too hard. They did not want to make a hard-rated movie about a sad man with a puppy unless a huge star was attached to it, and even though he had been a huge star, the people in the expensive suits were not sure if he still had the power to bring millions of people to the theater anymore. They thought his time had passed, and they looked at the budget for this film and they saw only a small pile of money compared to what other movies were spending. The actor met with a director named Chad, who he had known for a very long time. Chad used to work on the Matrix movies with him doing stunts, and they had shared meals and talked about fighting and movement for years. They sat in a plain room with a table and some chairs, and they talked about how they wanted this movie to look. They did not want it to look like the glossy, shiny action films that were coming out every summer. They wanted it to look dirty and real and fast. They wanted the fights to feel like dances where one wrong move meant you did not get up again. They talked about the way John Wick should move and the way the camera should follow him like it was breathing down his neck. The excitement in the room was real, but there was a big elephant standing in the corner of the room, and that elephant was money. The studio that was going to pay for the movie was worried. They looked at the numbers on their spreadsheets and they shook their heads. They wanted to make the movie, but they did not want to spend the money. It needed to be great. They wanted to cut corners. They wanted to film it in a few weeks and use cheap effects, and they did not want to pay for the best stunt team in the world to work for months and months to get every punch perfect. The director knew that if they did not have the money and the time, the movie would fail. It would just be another cheap action film that people forgot about 10 minutes after walking out of the theater. The meetings went on for days. The producers sat around long tables looking tired and checking their watches. They talked about lowering the budget even more. They talked about changing the script to make it cheaper to film. They talked about cutting whole scenes that were important to the story. The actor sat there and listened. He did not argue or yell. He just watched them worry about the money. He could see that the movie was dying right in front of him. The passion was there in the room, but the wallet was closed. He realized that if he walked away, the project would be shelved and John Wick would never exist. He looked at the director and he saw a man who had a vision but no power to make it happen. He saw a group of producers who wanted to help but were scared of losing their jobs if the movie flopped. He realized that in Hollywood the only people who really have the power to change things are the ones who are willing to pay for it. He thought about the script again. He thought about the retired killer and the grief and the dog. He knew this was a story worth telling, and he knew it had to be told the right way, not the cheap way. Deep inside his mind a plan started to form. He was not a greedy man, and he did not need a mansion with 20 rooms or a garage full of cars that he would never drive. He had lived through terrible tragedies in his real life, and he knew that money was not the thing that mattered the most. What mattered was doing good work and being around people who cared about what they were doing. He thought about the crew who would build the sets and the drivers who would move the cameras and the stunt people Who would get hit and bruised to make the fight scenes look real. He wanted them to have the chance to make something amazing. The actor decided that he was going to fix the problem himself. He realized that the only way to get the studio to say yes to the bigger budget and the better effects was to lower the cost of the most expensive part of the movie, which was him. He knew his name was still worth something, and he knew that if he offered to work for less, the studio would use that saved money to pay for the things the movie actually needed. It was a gamble because he might work for months and get very little in return. But looking at the tired faces around the table, he knew it was the only move that made sense. He leaned forward in his chair and the room got quiet. He looked at the studio bosses and he told them he did not need his usual salary. He told them to take the money they would have paid him and put it back into the production. He told them to use it for the visual effects team and the stunt coordinators and the costume design. He said that the movie was bigger than his paycheck. The producers looked at him in surprise. They were used to stars asking for more money, not less. They were used to agents fighting over every last dollar, but here was the main actor offering to give his money away to help the movie breathe. It was a moment that changed everything. The tension in the room broke because the financial pressure was suddenly lifted. The studio bosses looked at their papers again and saw that with this lower salary the movie could actually be made properly. They could afford the extra days of shooting. They could afford the high-speed cameras they needed to capture the style of fighting the director wanted. The script was saved not because a studio wrote a bigger check, but because one person decided that the art was more important than the fee. He left the meeting that day and drove home in his normal car, listening to the radio. He did not call his friends to brag about what he had done. He did not post a message on the internet telling everyone how generous he was being. He just went back to his quiet life, knowing that he had cleared the path for the work to begin. He felt a sense of peace because he knew that he had done the right thing for the story and the people who wanted to tell it. The movie was going to happen and it was going to be done right. He had taken a pay cut to give life to a fictional character who had lost everything, and in doing so he had given the crew a chance to make something they could be proud of for the rest of their. The days turned into weeks and the office where the movie was being planned was a mess of papers and empty coffee cups. The producer who was in charge of the money was looking at a spreadsheet that was filled with red numbers. He was a man who spent his whole life making deals and counting pennies, and he knew that this movie was in trouble. They had the actor and they had the director, but they did not have enough money to build the world that was described in the script. They needed a fancy nightclub scene with neon lights and hundreds of extras, and they needed a car chase that looked expensive, but they were running out of funds very quickly. The producer sat in his chair and rubbed his eyes. He felt a headache coming on because he knew that he would have to make a choice. He would have to cut the nightclub scene or make the car chase very short, and he knew that would disappoint the director and the actor. In this town, people usually solve this problem by asking the studio for more money, but the studio had already said no. They had given a final number and there was no more money in the bank. The actor walked into the office and saw the stress on the producer's face. He did not have a meeting scheduled, but he had a feeling that he needed to check on things. He was not the kind of star who waited for people to come to him. He liked to be in the middle of everything, making sure the ship was sailing in the right direction. He sat down opposite the producer and asked him what was wrong. The producer sighed and pointed to the numbers on the screen, explaining that the movie was too ambitious for the money they had in the bank. The actor looked at the screen for a long time. He did not see numbers. He saw a vision of the movie he wanted to make. He saw the way the light should hit the floor in the nightclub, and he saw the way the cars should crash. He knew that if they cut these corners the movie would feel cheap and the audience would know the difference immediately. He knew that this character deserved a better world to live in, even if that world was filled with violence and death. He thought about his own bank account and how much money he had saved from the big movies he made in the past. He did not need another big paycheck to feel safe. He had enough to live a simple life, and he did not care about buying fancy things or owning a huge island. He realized that the money he was asking for was sitting there like a block of ice that was stopping the movie from flowing freely. He looked at the producer and spoke in a quiet voice. He told the producer that he wanted to change the deal. He said that he would take less money upfront and he would give that money back to the production so they could build the sets and hire the visual effects team they needed. The producer looked at him like he was speaking a foreign language, because in all his years of working in the movie business he had never heard an actor say such a thing. Usually actors wanted more money for doing less work, not the other way around. The actor continued to explain his plan. He said that he wanted the movie to be the main character, not his salary. He wanted every dollar on the screen to be visible to the audience. He told the producer to take the money from his paycheck and put it into the lighting budget and the costume budget and the special effects. He said that if the movie looked amazing, then everyone would win in the end, including him, because he would be proud of the work. The producer was stunned, but he quickly realized that this was the solution to all his problems. He picked up the phone and called the studio lawyers to tell them about the new deal. The lawyers were confused and asked him to repeat himself because they could not believe what they were hearing. They asked if the actor was crazy or if he was being forced to do this, but the producer told them that this was exactly what the actor wanted to do. As the news spread through the production office, the mood began to change. People who were worried about losing their jobs started to relax. The set designers who were told to use cheap materials were suddenly told to buy the best wood and paint available. The lighting crew was told to rent the expensive equipment they wanted instead of making do with the old rusty gear. It was like a wave of energy went through the whole project, and it all came from the actor deciding to put the art above his own bank account. But the actor did not stop there. He knew that having good lights and sets was not enough. He knew that the soul of the movie was the people who were working on it every day. He thought about the stunt team and the camera crew and the people who drove the trucks. He knew that they would be working long hours and dangerous days to make this movie happen. He wanted to make sure they were taken care of. He went back to the contract negotiations with a new idea. He talked about the profit sharing, which is the money that comes in after the movie is released. Usually the star takes a huge chunk of this profit and the crew gets nothing, but the actor suggested a different plan. He said that he wanted to share his part of the profit with the crew. He wanted to set up a deal where if the movie made money, the people who built the sets and carried the cameras would get a bonus in their mailboxes. This was almost unheard of in the industry. Crew members were usually seen as temporary workers who were hired and fired without a second thought, but the actor saw them as partners in the creation of the story. He knew that without their hard work his performance would not matter. He knew that if they felt valued they would work harder and give everything they had to the movie. The producers sat around the table and looked at the contract again. They had never seen a contract that looked so good for the movie and so bad for the star. The actor was literally giving away millions of dollars to people he had never met before. He was sharing his future success with the drivers and the caterers and the makeup artists. It was a level of kindness that felt out of place in a business that was usually built on greed and ego. As the papers were signed, the actor did not ask for a copy of the contract to frame on his wall. He did not ask for a press release to tell the world what a good guy he was. He just shook hands with the producers and walked out of the office to go to the gym to train. He knew that the physical challenge of the movie was still ahead of him and he could not afford to be distracted by money. The mood on the set changed completely when filming started. The crew knew that the star had taken a pay cut for them. They did not know all the details, but they knew that the money was being spent on the right things. They saw the quality of the sets and the food that was being served to them during lunch breaks. It was better food than they usually had on a movie set, and the trucks were newer and the trailers were cleaner. Everyone felt a sense of loyalty to the project that went beyond just doing a job. They wanted to work harder because they felt respected. They knew that if the movie made money they would see some of it, and that thought kept them going during the long nights when it was raining or when they were exhausted. The atmosphere was not like a normal movie set where the star hides in a trailer and the crew grumbles in the rain. It felt like a family working together to build something special. The actor arrived on set every day with a smile on his face. He did not act like a boss, he acted like a co-worker. He picked up trash when he saw it and he helped move heavy equipment when the crew was struggling. He treated the person holding the microphone with the same respect that he treated the director. This behavior trickled down to everyone else. If the biggest star on the set was humble, then nobody else had an excuse to have a big ego. One day during a break in filming, a member of the lighting crew was eating a sandwich and watching the actor rehearse a fight scene. He thought about how much money the actor must have given up to make this day possible. He thought about his own family and how the extra bonus money would help him pay his bills and buy Christmas presents. He felt a lump in his throat because he realized that the actor cared about him even though they had never spoken more than a few words to each other. The actor continued to train until his body was sore and bruised. He wanted to make sure that every punch looked real and every fall looked dangerous. He knew that the audience would be able to tell if he was using a stunt double for the easy stuff, so he insisted on doing almost everything himself. This made the stunt team respect him even more because they knew he was putting his body on the line just like they were every day. The weeks went by and the movie started to take shape. The scenes looked incredible. The lighting was dark and moody just like they wanted it to be, and the action scenes were fast and brutal. The budget problems were gone because the actor had solved them with his own wallet. The producers were happy because the footage was looking better than they had dared to hope, but through it all the actor remained quiet. He did not want praise or applause, he just wanted to make a good movie. As the production moved towards the halfway point, the crew was tired but happy. They were making a movie that they knew would be special, and they knew that they were part of something rare in Hollywood. They were working on a project where the person in charge actually cared about the people doing the work, and they knew that when the cameras finally stopped rolling they would have memories and stories that would last them a lifetime, all because one man decided that money was not as important as people. The actor walked through the set one evening looking at the work that had been done. He saw the blood packs on the floor and the broken glass from a scene they had just filmed, and he smiled. He knew that the movie was going to be a success, not because of the budget but because of the heart that was being put into it. He knew that he had made the right choice to give his salary away because the result was right in front of his eyes and it was beautiful. He turned to a crew member who was sweeping the floor and thanked him for his hard work. The crew member just nodded, not knowing that the man in front of him was the reason he had such a good job and such good food to eat that day. The actor walked away into the shadows, ready to get back to work, ready to give even more of himself to the story. The production was rolling now and nothing could stop it. The financial fears were gone and the creative blocks were broken. The actor had paid for the freedom to make art and he had done it without asking for anything in return. The set was filled with a magic that money cannot buy and everyone could feel it in the air. They knew they were witnesses to something special, a kindness that was changing the way movies were made, one frame at a time. The sun was not yet up when the alarm went off in the small apartment where the actor was staying. He woke up immediately without hitting the snooze button because his body was used to the rhythm of the set. He stretched his arms and felt the soreness in his shoulders. It was a deep ache that came from weeks of throwing punches and falling onto hard mats. For a movie like this there was no way to avoid the pain because the character he was playing was a man who lived in violence, and the actor knew that to make it look real he had to go through the fire himself. He got dressed quietly, putting on his workout clothes and lacing up his boots before heading out into the cold morning air to drive to the studio. When he arrived on the lot, the place was almost empty. Only a few security guards were walking around. The actor walked to the training gym where the stunt team was already warming up. They were a tough group of people, men and women who had spent their lives getting hit and crashing cars for the entertainment of others. They usually kept to themselves because actors often treated them like background furniture, but this time was different because the actor did not go to a private room to stretch. He walked right into the middle of their circle and nodded at them. They started the training with judo throws and grappling moves. It was intense and rough. The actor was thrown onto the mat over and over again, hitting the floor with a loud thud that echoed through the gym, but every time he hit the ground he bounced right back up and asked for more. He wanted to understand how the move felt so he could sell it on camera. He watched the stuntmen closely, copying their breathing and their footwork. He treated them like teachers, not just employees. He respected their skill and the risk they took with their bodies every day. This respect created a bond between them that was stronger than just a working relationship. They stopped calling him Mr. or Sir and started talking to him like he was one of the crew. They joked with him and gave him advice on how to take a hit without getting seriously hurt. He listened to everything they said because he knew they were the experts in this world. The hours passed and the sweat poured down their faces, mixing with the bruises that were starting to form on their arms and legs. After the morning training they moved to the main set to film a big scene inside a nightclub. The set was amazing with neon lights flashing and smoke drifting through the air, but it was also hot and uncomfortable. The air conditioning could not keep up with the heat from the lights and the crowd of extras. The actor had to wear a heavy suit and tie for the scene, which made it even harder to move. He was drenched in sweat after just a few takes, but he never complained. He just asked for water and went back to his mark. The stunt team was dressed as bad guys in the scene, waiting for their cues to attack the actor one by one. They were wearing thick pads under their clothes to protect themselves from the blows, but it still hurt when they got hit. The actor noticed this. He saw the stuntmen wincing in pain between takes and rubbing their shoulders. He saw the exhaustion in their eyes as they waited for hours in the heat just to do 5 seconds of action. He knew that they were the unsung heroes of the movie. Without them, the action would look fake and boring. During a break in the filming, the actor sat on the floor with his back against the wall. Instead of going to his comfortable trailer, he was eating a sandwich and drinking from a plastic bottle of water. A stuntman sat down next to him looking tired. They started talking about the stuntman's family and how hard it was to be away from home for so long. The actor listened with genuine interest. He asked questions and laughed at the stories. He did not look at his phone or check his watch. He was fully present in the conversation. As the weeks went by, the actor started to think about a way to thank these people for their hard work. He knew that the crew was working long hours for a standard wage, but the stunt team was taking the physical risks that could end their careers. He wanted to do something that showed them how much he appreciated their sacrifice and their friendship. He started making secret phone calls during his lunch breaks, talking to a shop that made high-quality watches. He spent his own money on this gift. It was not coming from the studio budget, it was coming straight from his pocket. He picked a watch that was built to be tough and reliable, something that could handle the rough life of a stunt person. He had 87 of them made, one for every member of the stunt and special effects team. On the back of each watch he had a special message engraved. It was not just his name, it was a symbol of the time they spent together making this movie. The production was nearing the end of the schedule and everyone was feeling the mix of sadness and relief that comes with finishing a big job. The mood on the set was heavy with exhaustion, but there was also a buzz of excitement because they all knew the footage looked incredible. The actor decided that the time was right to give his gift. He did not want to make a big scene with cameras and reporters. He wanted it to be private and real. He gathered the entire stunt team together in a quiet corner of the studio soundstage. The director and the producers were not invited. This was just for them. The team stood around wondering what was going on. They thought maybe he was going to talk about the final shot of the movie. The actor stood in front of them looking a little nervous, which was strange because he had been facing explosions and gunfights for months without fear. He started to speak in his soft voice. He told them that watching them work had been the honor of his life. He said that they were the true artists of the film and that he could not have made the character come alive without them. He told them that Hollywood often forgot about the people who do the dangerous work, but he never would. Then he started pulling boxes out of a bag and handing them out. The stuntmen opened the boxes and their eyes went wide when they saw what was inside. They saw the gleam of the metal and the serious face of the watch. They turned them over and saw the engraving on the back. A moment of silence passed over the group as they realized what he had done. This was not a cheap prop or a t-shirt. It was a valuable gift that cost a lot of money. It was a gift that said you are important and your work matters. One of the older stunt coordinators stepped forward. He was a man who had seen it all in his 30 years in the business and he was not easily impressed, but he looked at the actor with tears in his eyes. He grabbed the actor's hand and shook it hard. No words were needed between them. The handshake said it all. It said, "Thank you, brother." Other members of the team came forward to hug him and pat him on the back. The mood in the room shifted from exhaustion to pure joy and respect. After the gifts were handed out, the actor did not leave to go back to his trailer. He stayed there and talked with them. He looked at their watches and laughed. He asked them if they thought the watches could survive a car crash. The group felt like a family in that moment, not just a collection of workers hired to do a job. The barriers between the star and the stunt team had been completely broken down by his generosity. This act of kindness sent a ripple through the entire set that day. The lighting crew heard about it and the camera operators heard about it too. It made everyone want to work harder because they knew that the leading man was a person who truly cared about the people around him. It created an atmosphere of trust and loyalty that is very rare in the movie business. People stopped complaining about the long hours and started focusing on how to make the movie even better. The filming continued for a few more days, but the vibe was different now. There was a feeling of celebration in the air. The actor continued to work just as hard as ever, throwing himself into the action with total commitment, but now there was a smile on his face. More often he would look over at the stunt team between takes and point to his wrist, checking the time with his new watch, making a joke that would make everyone laugh. When the final scene was finally shot, the crew erupted in applause, but the actor did not stand on a podium to accept the praise. He turned around and started clapping for the stunt team. He pointed at them and signaled for the crew to look at them. He wanted the credit to go to them. He wanted the world to know that these were the people who made the magic happen. The cameras rolled, capturing the moment, but it was a moment of genuine gratitude, not a photo opportunity. As the lights were turned off and the set began to go dark, the actor walked through the empty hallway of the nightclub set for the last time. He touched the walls and looked at the fake blood stains on the floor. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction, not because he was going to be a movie star again, but because he had done it the right way. He had made a good movie with good people and he had taken care of his team. He got into his car and drove away into the night, ready to disappear but leaving behind a group of friends who would never forget him. Final days of filming arrived on the set like a quiet winter morning. The air was thick with the mixture of excitement and sadness that always comes when a big job is coming to an end. The crew members walked a little slower as they moved their equipment from the sound stages to the trucks parked outside. They were tired, their bodies were aching from months of long nights and heavy lifting, but there was also a smile on their faces because they knew they had created something special. The actor who played the lead role did not slow down at all. He was still the first person to arrive and the last person to leave, running on a fuel that nobody else could understand. He moved through the set like a ghost, checking on the lighting guys and thanking the makeup artists for their patience. He did not act like a movie star who was about to finish a blockbuster. He acted like a man who was just doing his job and saying goodbye to friends. The atmosphere was different from other sets. Usually on the last week of a movie, the main actor disappears into a luxury trailer, only coming out when the camera is rolling, but this actor spent his breaks sitting on boxes with the grip crew, eating the same donuts and drinking the same lukewarm coffee that everyone else was drinking. The final scene was scheduled to be shot at night. It was the conclusion of the story where the main character faces the consequences of his actions. The set was dark and moody, lit by blue and red lights that cast long shadows across the walls. The director called for silence and the whole crew held their breath. The actor stepped into the frame and for a moment he was not the kind man who gave away watches and bonuses. He was the tired and deadly assassin who had nothing left to lose. They ran the scene once and then twice and then a third time until the director finally stood up and smiled. The director shouted that they were done and that it was a wrap for the entire production. Normally this is the moment where chaos erupts. People cheer and throw their hats in the air and pop bottles of champagne. The crew on the set did cheer and hug each other, but there was a sense of calm in the middle of the noise. The actor stood in the center of the room watching the celebration unfold. He did not raise his arms or shout for joy. He just took a deep breath and looked around at the faces of the people he had worked with. He saw the joy in their eyes, but he also saw the relief that the hard work was finally over. Producers and publicists started to gather near the exit. They were holding phones and checking their schedules. They wanted to organize a wrap party. They wanted to take photos of the star holding a clapperboard. They wanted to make sure the news outlets knew that the movie was finished and that the star was back in business. They expected him to walk over to them and start posing for the cameras. They were ready to put him in a car and drive him to a fancy restaurant where they would drink expensive wine and talk about how great the movie was going to be. The actor did not go over to the producers. Instead, he turned his back on the bright lights and the noise. He walked toward the dark corners of the set where the stunt team was gathering their pads and helmets. He approached them one by one. He shook hands with the men who had been thrown across the room and punched in the face for his character. He hugged the women who had doubled for the female leads and put their bodies on the line for the perfect shot. These were not quick handshakes meant for cameras. These were long and meaningful embraces where words were spoken quietly that only they could hear. He moved through the different departments saying goodbye to the lighting technicians who made him look cool and the sound engineers who captured every breath and footstep. He thanked the people who drove the trucks and the people who swept the floors. He treated the carpenters with the same respect he treated the director. He looked them in the eye and told them that he would never forget what they did for him. The crew was stunned by his attention. They were used to being invisible to the stars. But he saw them and he made them feel like the most important people on the planet. After he had said his personal goodbyes, he walked to his dressing room. It was a small space, not a mansion on wheels. He did not have assistants packing his clothes for him. He packed his own bag, folding his jeans and placing his script into his backpack. He looked around the room to make sure he had not left anything behind. He wanted to leave it exactly as he found it, clean and empty. It was his way of showing respect to the people who would have to clean up after him. Outside, the word started to spread that the actor was getting ready to leave. The producers panicked because they had not prepared their official send-off. The press agents rushed to their cars thinking they needed to follow him and get a statement. They wanted to know where he was going to celebrate. They wanted to know what he was going to do next. They were expecting him to leave through the front gate where the paparazzi were waiting with their flashes ready to blind him. But the actor knew the layout of the studio better than anyone. He knew where the security guards spent their breaks and he knew which gates were left open for deliveries. He did not walk toward the red carpet or the main exit. He shouldered his bag and walked out the back door. The air was cool and crisp and the parking lot was dimly lit. He walked toward his car, which was a normal vehicle that did not stand out in a crowd. He did not have a driver waiting for him. He drove himself. He got into the driver's seat and started the engine. The sound was low and steady. He sat there for a moment looking at the dark building where the magic had happened. He thought about the people inside who were still celebrating and he hoped they would have a good night. He felt a sense of peace because he knew he had done everything he could to make the movie a success and to take care of the people who helped him make it. He put the car in gear and drove away without turning on his headlights until he was off the lot. He merged onto the main road and became just another car in the traffic stream. The producers were still inside looking for him. The photographers were still waiting at the front gate, but the actor was already gone. He did not head toward a club or a party. He headed toward the highway. He drove away from the noise and the lights of Hollywood. His phone started to ring on the passenger seat. He could see the screen lighting up with calls from agents and managers wondering where he was, but he did not answer. He let it ring until it went silent. He did not want to explain himself. He did not want to make a big speech about why he left. He just wanted to be alone. He had given his money to the budget. He had given his salary to the crew. He had given his time and his blood to the character, and now he was giving himself the freedom to just disappear. Back on the set, the crew started to realize that he was not coming back. They gathered outside his trailer and knocked on the door, but there was no answer. Someone looked out the back window and saw that his parking spot was empty. A silence fell over the group as they realized what he had done. He had slipped away into the night without saying a word to the press, without taking a bow, without seeking any applause for the sacrifices he had made. The news of his departure spread through the lot like a whisper. The producers were frustrated because they missed their photo opportunity, but deep down they felt a strange sense of admiration. He had played the role of the hitman perfectly, and then he had exited the stage just like the character would have. He had vanished without a trace, leaving only the memory of his kindness and the amazing work they had done together. The crew stood in the empty parking lot for a while looking at the stars and realizing that they had been part of something that they would probably never see again in their careers. The actor drove for miles until the city was far behind him. He watched the road stretching out in front of him and he felt light. He was not thinking about the box office or the reviews or the sequels that might happen in the future. He was thinking about the feeling of the handshake he shared with the stunt team and the smile on the face of the lighting guy. He was happy because he knew that in a world built on fake images he had done something real. He had been a true friend and he had made a movie with his heart, and now he was free. Lights dimmed in thousands of theaters across the country and the screen flickered to life with the roar of an engine. The audience settled into their seats holding buckets of popcorn and sodas, expecting just another action movie with loud noises and simple jokes, but what they saw was different. They saw a story told with silence and looks that spoke louder than words. They watched a man broken by grief come back to life only to destroy everything around The theater was quiet during the action scenes because people were leaning forward in their seats holding their breath. They had never seen fight choreography that looked so real and so artistic. When the credits rolled, the applause was deafening. It was the sound of an audience realizing they had just witnessed something special. The movie was a massive hit. It broke box office records and surprised all the critics who had written it off. The phones at the production office started ringing off the hook, but nobody was calling to complain. They were calling to congratulate the studio and to ask about the sequel. The headlines in the newspapers and on the internet were all about the resurrection of the actor. They called it a comeback. They said he was back and better than ever. The world was suddenly in love with the character of the retired assassin and the man who played him. But behind all the noise and the flashing lights, a much quieter story was beginning to unfold. Word began to leak out from the crew members who had worked on the film. They sat in bars and coffee shops telling their friends about what had happened behind the scenes. They talked about the actor who gave away his salary to pay for better sets and better food. They talked about the watches and the way he hugged the stunt team. These stories spread like wildfire on social media. People were sharing posts about his kindness and generosity. The narrative was changing from "he is a cool action star" to "he is a good human being." The public wanted to hear more. They wanted to know if the rumors were true. They wanted to hear him explain why he did it. The press went into a frenzy. Reporters from entertainment shows and magazines were hunting for him. They wanted the exclusive interview. They wanted to ask him about the money and the watches. They wanted to know how it felt to save a movie by sacrificing his own paycheck. They camped outside the gates of the movie studio. They staked out the offices of his agents and managers. They were desperate to get a quote or a photo of him celebrating his victory. The machine of Hollywood was ready to turn him into a saint, and they wanted to parade him in front of the cameras to prove that nice guys could finish first. But the actor was nowhere to be found in the places where they usually looked. He was not seen at the fancy after parties in the hills. He was not walking down the red carpet at the premieres waving to the crowd. He was not staying in the presidential suite of the most expensive hotel in the city while the flashbulbs popped. The cameras pointed at empty doorsteps and the reporters grew frustrated. They could not understand why he was not capitalizing on the moment. They could not understand why he was not taking credit for the good deeds he had done. The truth was that he had simply vanished back into his own life just as quietly as he had left the set. While the world was looking for a celebrity, he was living his life as a private citizen. A few days after the movie opened, he was spotted in New York City. He was not surrounded by bodyguards. He was not wearing a disguise to hide from the world. He was dressed in a simple jacket and jeans, and he was carrying his own backpack. He stood on the subway platform waiting for the train just like everyone else. When the train arrived, it was crowded and there were no empty seats. He stood near the door holding onto the rail, swaying gently with the motion of the car. People looked up from their phones and recognized him. They saw the famous face from the movie screen standing right there in front of them, but nobody screamed and nobody mobbed him. There was a silent respect in the air because he looked so at peace, so normal. He noticed people looking and he gave a small nod or a shy smile. He was just another person trying to get from one place to another. Another time he was seen sitting on a bench in Central Park. It was a cloudy afternoon and he was alone. He had a small sandwich wrapped in plastic and a bottle of water. He sat watching the dogs play in the grass and the children running around. He did not have a phone in his hand. He was just watching the world go by. A photographer who was walking by saw him and raised his camera to take a picture, but then lowered it again. The photographer saw that the actor looked happy in his solitude. The moment felt too human to intrude upon, and the photographer walked away, leaving the actor to his lunch and his thoughts. He did not need the interviews to validate his work, and he did not need the praise to feel good about himself. He knew that the crew had been paid fairly. He knew that the movie was a work of art that people enjoyed, and that was enough reward for him. The money he had given away was not lost. It was transformed into the beautiful sets, the amazing stunts, and the happiness of the people who worked on the film. He saw his wealth not as something to hoard in a bank vault, but as a tool to make things better for the people around him. The studio executives continued to try to reach him. They wanted to talk about the next movie in the series. They wanted to sign contracts and deposit millions of dollars into his account, but he was in no rush to return to the spotlight. He was enjoying the quiet. He was reading books and listening to music and spending time with the people who mattered to him. He had played the role of the vengeful ghost, and now he was content to be a living ghost in the real world, moving unseen through the crowds. The story of his salary and his disappearance became a legend in Hollywood. It was passed down from producer to producer as an example of how things should be done. It reminded people that movies are not just about money and egos, they are about collaboration and respect. The actor never wrote a book about it. He never went on a talk show to brag about his sacrifice. He just let the work speak for itself. As the months went by, the hype around the movie died down and the reporters moved on to the next big scandal. The actor remained, however, unchanged by the fame and the success. He continued to live simply and give generously. He understood that the true measure of a man is not what he takes from the world but what he gives back to it, and he had given everything he had to the story and the people who told it. He walked down the street one evening with his hands in his pockets. The street lights were flickering on and the city was getting loud with traffic. He looked like just another shadow merging with the darkness. He had no entourage and no destination. He was just walking and breathing and being alive in a way that most people never get to be. He had given away his salary and he had vanished from the set without telling a soul, and in doing so he had become more real to people than any character he could ever play on the screen. He was free and he was happy, and that was the only ending to the story that he ever needed.